course, I'm going to show you how to start and finish a project in After Effects, the interface, how to create a simple graphics animation, go through the After Effects 3D space, and create a simple animation of a cube we create using 3D layers. So just sit back and enjoy the basics of After Effects. About After Effects. I call After Effects a multifunctional Photoshop because if you have ever used Photoshop, you will realize that After Effects tools are almost completely similar to Photoshop with a little more functionality. So if you are familiar with Photoshop, After Effects will really be easy for you to learn. But don't worry if you are not familiar with Photoshop. After Effects will also be easy for you to learn since it's a relatively easy program to learn. And a plus for you, when you go to learn Photoshop, it will be like learning a simplified After Effects. After Effects is simple but really big, and when you advance, you will realize its full potential, and a lot of people are getting employed to master just a portion of it. For example, people are being employed to do color grading, which you can do all in After Effects. Roto brushing, motion tracking, compositing, matte painting, set extensions, all this can be done in After Effects, and today people who are really good at them are earning a lot of money from them. So you have the option to specify in one niche or do it all. This course is to get you started and learn the things you need to know for every specific niche you may choose to specialize in. Hardware and software requirements. To run After Effects smoothly on your computer should meet these minimum requirements. It should at least be a dual core, have at least 1 GB of RAM, and a minimum of 256 MB of video memory, at least 15 GB of space on your hard drive. And for better performance, you may need to invest in a graphics card. Why After Effects? So you may wonder why After Effects, not another 2D graphics animation program. Well, here are some key points. It's the industry standard, and being the industry standard means a lot of improvements are being made every time and a lot of developers are developing for it. Which brings us to another point, plugins. There are a lot of programmers out there developing cool plugins that can be used with After Effects for ease and better results. After Effects is a program from the Adobe CC package, which comes with other programs like Photoshop, Premiere Pro, Illustrator, and more, which are also leading in their specific niche. And most of them can be linked directly to After Effects. It's really easy to learn and has a big job market. About the author. Hello, I'm Busingi Ismails, a visual effects supervisor from EVX Films. I've been working in After Effects for over 6 years now, creating commercials, visual effects, and more other cool stuff. After Effects is a very great program, or should I say, a very awesome program, and it's the Hollywood gold standard today. It has been used to create a lot of awesome stuff you see in a lot of movies, TV commercials. So if you're looking for a program that will help you add that explosion into your homemade movie, or you just want to create a simple graphic animation, or try out a new skill for yourself, take my word, you're doing the right thing, investing your time in After Effects or this course. So welcome to this course, The Basics of After Effects, where we'll be looking at the basics of After Effects from opening to finishing your first project. Thank you. This lesson will look at the welcome screen. When you first open After Effects, the welcome screen will open. This is subdivided into different sections. For example, up on the welcome screen, you'll see the version of After Effects. For example, this version we're using After Effects CS 5.5. You'll have your most recent projects under recent projects, button to open a project, new composition, help and support, templates. If in your case you opened After Effects and the welcome screen did not show up as startup, it may be because you disabled it to open on startup or someone did. So let's say it didn't open. To make sure that it opens every time you open After Effects, you can go under help, under the menu bar, help, welcome and tip of the day. So welcome screen will open, and then Make sure the show welcome and tip of the desk at startup has been checked. In this lesson, we'll look at the After Effects interface. The After Effects interface is subdivided into sections called panels. For example, we have the projects panel. This contains a list of working files in your project. For example, we have a composition we have just created listed under the projects panel. And also, if we imported a new file, by going under File, Import, let's say we imported a picture. Okay. Other than your working files being listed in the projects panel, it also gives you some preview of your files. For example, if we select this image, we can see a preview of that image and some information about the dimension, aspect ratio, and millions of colors. And if we select the composition, you can see also some brief information about it: the dimension, aspect ratio, the duration, and the frame rate. We have the composition or work area panel. This is your workspace. It's where you preview your projects. For example, if we create a new composition by going under Composition, New Composition, and then clicking OK. If we insert this image into that composition by holding and dragging either to the timeline or to the work area or in the composition panel. So this will give us a preview of what we are working, and also will be the workspace in our project. We also have the timeline. This holds our working layers. So if we added another layer, so let's say if we added a new solid layer, we look at layers in detail in the later lesson. So if we have two layers, the timeline helps us arrange the layers, also holds our time frame. So it's where we can arrange our layers, and it also holds our layer properties. So going forward, we have the info tab, the preview, effects and presets. In this lesson, we'll look at the projects panel. If you don't see the projects panel in your work area, for example, if it has been removed like that when it's not there, you can access it under the menu bar, Window, and then under the drop down menu, choose Project, or use the shortcut Ctrl 0 to open the projects panel. The projects panel is subdivided in two sections: the above section and the lower section. The above section is a preview area for your working files if selected. If we imported a file by going under File, Import, File, and selected an image, open, we can see in the lower section we have it listed, and we have some details about that image. We have the name of the image, the name of the file, the file type, the size, the frame. We can also expand these panels by moving the cursor into the intersections between the panels and then dragging to expand, or dragging. Drag right to expand, drag left to shrink the panels. We can drag to see more details about the composition. We can see the file path, comment, tape number or tape name, out point, in point. So, and you can also add more columns by right clicking on this bar and then going to columns. Let's add the media duration, and so we have the media duration. Because this is an image, it has no duration. So you can also remove that name or some details by right clicking on that detail and say hide this, hide this, hide this, which you can also access back by right clicking on this bar, then going to the pop-up menu and select the detail you want to add in. In this video, we will look at the timeline. We use the timeline panel to arrange layer positions. For example, you can move them top, bottom, or in between. To arrange layers in time. To change and animate layer properties. And to change the blending modes of layers. For example, change the mode. The current time of the composition is indicated by the time indicator, this red vertical line. And you can see the current time by seeing this time indicator. You can change between viewing seconds and frames by holding Ctrl and clicking the digits displayed here. It will also show the frame rate at which your composition is running. You can zoom in to see more seconds. For example, we are seeing a timeline that is at 2-second interval from 0, 2, 4, 6. But you can choose to see more frames by zooming the timeline. Just drag the slider. On the timeline, we also have the work area, which is this bar, which you can drag to set the beginning and the start of the work area. For example, we can choose to preview the whole timeline by extending the work area to the end and clicking Run Preview to load the frames into Cache for a smooth preview of the animation. Or if you want to preview a portion of the timeline, drag the end and start of the work area to the portion of the timeline that you want to preview, and then click Run Preview to preview that area. The timeline is divided in two sides, the left side and the right side. The left side consists of columns for control of layers, and the right side consists the timeline, the markers, keyframes, and time bars for the layers. To create a new composition in After Effects, go to the Composition menu, New Composition, or use the shortcut Ctrl-N. The Composition Settings panel will open. From here, you can change the name of your composition. New Composition. You can either choose from a list of presets under the Presets drop-down menu. For now, we'll be using the HDV 720 preset. Or you can choose to use your own settings by changing the width, height, aspect ratio, the frame rate, or the duration of your composition, and then clicking OK. After creating a new composition, a new timeline for your composition will be created. Since each composition has its own timeline, you can tell that This timeline is for the composition, new composition we have just created. And from the work area or preview area, you will see the name of the composition you are working in. If you're not satisfied with the settings of the composition you have created, you can change those settings by going to composition settings, and then you will access the composition settings again. From there, you can as well choose a different preset or to other settings you may want. You can as well preview the information about the composition you have created by selecting it from the projects panel, and a list of information about that composition will be displayed in the projects panel preview area. You can see the name of the composition, the dimension, the duration, and the frame rate, plus the aspect ratio in the brackets. In this video, we'll look at composition settings. To access the settings of your composition, you can either, on the timeline, right-click and go to composition settings. Or, in the projects panel, you can select the composition and right-click to access the composition settings from the menu. Or, go to composition from the menu bar, composition settings, or use the shortcut Ctrl-K. Here you can change the name of your composition, change from a list of presets. They either come in DV or HDTV. You can also change the width or height by clicking on the figure. Then let's say if I wanted a width of 1920, you can see, because the aspect ratio is locked, when I try to change the width of the composition, we can see the height changes as well. If we go back to 720, you can see the width also changes. This helps you maintain the aspect ratio used while creating the composition. You can uncheck this to type in specific figures for the width and the height. Resolution will determine the final output of your composition. Changing from full to half will mean that if your composition is 500 by 500, it will export half of that width. For example, it will export 250 instead of the full 500. And if you change to a third, it will mean that you will be exporting a third of your full resolution. You can also change the duration of your composition and the background color of your composition. To import files in After Effects, go to the File menu, Import, File. Select the file you want to import, then click Open. The file you have imported will be listed in the Projects panel with the information about it, the name, dimension, and other information. You can also import multiple files by going under File, Import, Multiple Files. Select the file you want to open, click Open. Automatically, the import panel will reopen. Select the second file, click Open, and after you're done, click Open. Or another way to import multiple files, go under File, Import, File, and select the files you want to import. Then click Open. You can also import by double-clicking in the Projects panel to open the import dialog box, and then open. You can also use the shortcut Ctrl-I to open, Ctrl-I. To see the type of files After Effects can import, go to File, Import, File, and then under the import file, Files of Type, All Acceptable Files. Click on this drop-down menu, and then a list of acceptable files will be open. After Effects also allows you to import folders. For example, to import a folder, go to File, Import, File, access the folder you want to import, select it, and then don't click open, but below the import file you will find a button called import folder. Click it and the entire folder will be imported. You can also arrange imported files in 2 folders for organization. For example, if I wanted to keep all images into one folder, I could just select. First, I could just arrange by type, then select all the images, drag them into this icon, this folder icon in the compositions panel. This will create a new folder, then you can rename it to images. You can also create another folder for compositions by selecting the compositions you have in the list, drag them into a new folder, compositions. This helps you organize your scene and easy accessibility to your file. In this lesson, we'll look at saving and opening recent projects. Let's say you have been working on this project for over 10 minutes and you didn't save at the first time you opened the project. You work, and as you're working, the project suddenly crashes. So because you're not saving, if you want to work on the project again, you will have to start from scratch again. Not from where the project crashed or where you had stopped, but from right the beginning. To avoid this, always make sure you save your project at least after every 10 minutes of your working. So to save a project, go under the main menu bar and from the drop down menu, click save to open the save dialog box. So select where you want to save. This time I will save on there. For my case, I will save on the desktop. New project. And then save. So our project has been saved, and if it crashes anytime now, I don't have to worry a lot. I can open the project and start immediately where I stopped. Sometimes also the project you saved can crash. I don't know why. I think it's a bug or something. But your project you saved can also crash or get corrupted. So to be more safe, I always recommend, for myself, for my case, I always save 2 copies of my project. So to save a copy of your project, you can go to File, Save As, and then Save a Copy. This was the first version we saved, and then the second copy, I usually call it 2. This is 1 and this is 2. So I have saved 2 different versions. So in case one version gets corrupted, I always have the other copy as a backup. The other thing I can say about saving is that if you save a project in CS 5.5, Adobe After Effects CS5 or any version below the version you saved will not be able to open that project. For example, if we had saved this project in CS6, because this is CS 5.5, it will not be able to open that project. A lower version cannot open any file saved in a version above it. So CS4 cannot open files from CS5. CS5 cannot open files from CS6. But CS5 can open any version below it. It can open CS4, can open CS3. So what do you do when you have a project that you saved in CS5.5 but you want to open it using CS4? What you do, you can go under File, Save As, and then you can see any version will save one version below it. So see, we are in, and to check the version you're using, you can go under Help, Welcome, and Tip of the Day. From there you can see the kind of version you're using. I'm using version CS5.5. So if you have, let's say, CS5, you can save a version for CS4. If you have CS3, you can save a version for, was it 1.5? Yes, I think it was 1.5. So, and anyone with CS6 can save a version for CS5.5. So to save that a version for CS5, in my case, go under File, Save As, save a copy as CS5. So if you're having CS5, you will have save a copy as CS4. If you have CS4, you will have save a copy as CS3, and so on. And for CS6, you have a version for CS5.5. So save as, and you will see that the version will be left in that bracket. So we are saving for CS5.5. If you had a project already previously you had worked on, to open it, you can go under File, Open Recent Projects, and you will have a list of all your most recent projects you have been worked on. In this video, we'll look at layers in After Effects. To create a layer, first, let's create a new composition by going to Composition, New Composition. Choose a preset, then OK. To access the different types of layers in After Effects, go to Layer, New, and you'll find a list of different types of layer that can be used in After Effects. For example, a text layer that contains text, solid layer, which is basically a rectangular shape, the light, camera, the null object, the shape layer, adjustment layer. These are not the only types of layers in After Effects. The other layers include image layers that are created by importing images, video layers that are created by importing videos. For example, if I want to File, Import, File, okay, would have, if I drag this video into the timeline, I would have a video layer. You can see my preview is lagging since I'm recording while I'm working on this project. So to make sure I have a smoother preview, I would have to reduce the preview resolution from full to either half, third, or a quarter. This time I'll put on third. It's still lagging since my computer is doing a lot of stuff in the background. Get the point. Let's create the other types of layers in After Effects. Let's go to Layer, New, Text. Type in text and then enter. Hit the numpad enter, or just select the selection tool to confirm the text layer. Go to Layer, New, create a solid layer, which is basically a rectangle shape with a fill color. Change the color to blue. Okay. You see, when I created a new solid layer, we got a new panel called the Solid Settings panel. This helps you change the settings for the solid layer. For example, the height, the width, aspect ratio, and the color of that layer. We also have shape layers, which are created using the shape tools. For example, we can draw a shape, circle, change the color, can choose between different shapes by dragging over the icon. When you draw a shape while selecting another shape layer, you won't be creating a new layer, but that shape will be drawn under that layer you selected. For example, if I drew a polygon while selecting this layer, this shape layer, let me change the color. You can see that it has been added to this shape layer. So we have 3 polygons. We have a circle, we have an ellipse, a star, another star, and another polygon. But if I had no other layer selected and I drew a polygon, send this to yellow. Sorry. You can see that a new shape layer has been created with only a rectangle shape. Now if also I drew another layer while selecting that same layer, I'll be creating another shape on the same layer. This works only if I've selected a shape layer. But if I was selecting another kind of layer, for example, if it was a text layer, let us first drag this to the top. Maybe increase the size of the font. Center it. If I was selecting this layer, a text layer, and I drew a shape over the text while selecting the text layer, I'll be creating what we call a mask, which we'll look at in a later tutorial. Layers in a composition are rendered depending on what layer is on top. For example, our text layer is on top of every other layer, so it appears on top. Let's first delete this mask to reveal everything. So our text layer is above every other layer. That is why it is being rendered on top of all other layers. If we put it below this shape layer, let us first switch it off to see this yellow layer. Sorry, we moved the wrong layer. If we move, you can see it has gone behind the yellow shapes, but it's still above the pink shapes. And if we move, you can see. And if we brought the star shape on top of the text layer, the text will go behind. If we brought the blue layer, which is this solid layer, solid blue rectangle shape on top of the blue layer on the text layer, and see the text is now entirely covered the way the video layer with the horses has been covered. If we bring it back on top, it will be covering everything. If we bring it below, one layer, one more layer, let's see. The visibility of layers can be turned off in the timeline panel by checking or unchecking this icon on the left side of the timeline panel. So you can switch them off, switch off the stars. Can bring this back on. We can also lock layers so that we cannot move or select them. Let's see. When I try to select the yellow shapes or the star shape, I can't. I only just access the layer below them, since these layers have been locked. And we lock them by checking the boxes aligned to the lock icon. We can also solo layers to only view them by that layer. So if I wanted to see only the yellow layer without first turning off all the layers, I'll just solo that layer, which is this, by checking this box aligned to that dot. This will hide any other layer but that layer. If I wanted to solo only the text, in this lesson, we'll look at shape layers. To create a shape layer, go to Layer, New, Shape Layer. So we have now a shape layer. And under the shape layer, if we look at the layer properties for this shape layer by clicking on this triangle, we see under it has two properties, the transform property and the content. So contents is an attribute that holds any type of polygon created on this layer. For example, if I drew a star on this shape by clicking the shape tool and then dragging in this workspace, you see under contents, now I have a polygon called polystar. And if I drew another type of shape, you see, and then an ellipse, you can change the color of the polygon you're drawing by using the top menu bar. So if I want to change the color of the circle I want to draw, I just click on this color box and then choose a color I want to use. Let's go with the red. To create a custom shape, select the shape tool, make sure no other layer is selected or have no other layer in your scene, and then click into this. So we have created this polygon. You can choose to remove points by hovering over a point you want to remove, and then until the pen tool turns into a negative, into a minus, then click. So we have reduced that. So remove this. To add a point, move your cursor or your pen tool to the edge of the shape until a plus sign comes. Until the plus sign comes, then you have a point. To move that point, use the selection tool and then select the point. In this video, we'll look at animating layer properties. First, let's create a new composition by going under Composition, New Composition, choose a preset, then OK. Let's add a new layer by going to Layer, New, Solid, or in this case, let's just use a shape layer. For example, let's use a star tool. Select the tool and then drag in the work area to create the star shape. Then let's move it there. So to access the layer properties of this layer, select the layer, and then to reveal the layer properties, click the triangular icon so that it's pointing down. Under the shape layer properties, it has two main layer properties. It has the contents and the transform properties. This is true for most layers. For example, if we had the text layer, it has also two attributes, text and transform. But some layers only have the transform property, but not any other property. So, for example, if we added an adjustment layer, you can see only has the transform property, but doesn't have any other. It has only one property, the transform property. In this video, we're only going to look at the transform property. So let's bring up the transform property attributes. We can see that we have the anchor point, position, scale, rotation, opacity. All these attributes can be animated. This is indicated by the stopwatch next to the property or attribute. And by clicking the stopwatch, we can see that it has created a new keyframe to mark or record attribute at that point on the timeline. To go through these properties, the anchor point is the point of reference for these three attributes. For example, the scale, if we scaled the property, this star, we can see that the scaling is from this anchor point, and the anchor point is this point. So if we change the position of the anchor point and we scale, and see that still the scaling is from the anchor point, this point. If we went to the rotation, and see the rotation is around the anchor point. So the anchor point is the pivot of rotation. And if we reset and rotate it, you can see that here. And so is the position. we can move the anchor point by using these digits or using the pan behind tool, which we can access under the toolbar, using this icon and dragging it to the position you want. And now you can see that let's reset. The stopwatch, this stopwatch, enables us to record or activate animation for a specific property. For example, if we set a stopwatch for this position, it will be activating keyframes for this position attribute. And the keyframes are these diamond structures or icons on the timeline. So if we set a keyframe at this point, it means that the position of this layer has been marked at this specific time as this position. And if we moved forward on the timeline and we mark that position by clicking this diamond shape mark of keyframe, or by automatically, let us first remove this keyframe by moving the shape to another position. If the stopwatch has been activated, the keyframe will be automatically marked for that point. So if we move this layer to another position, a keyframe will be automatically inserted for that position to mark that position at that current time. So again, if we moved the time indicator to another frame or another time and we moved the layer, it will also mark that position but with a keyframe. So if we move the timeline, these keyframes indicate the position and the time of that layer, or the attribute and the time of that layer. So this keyframe shows that at this specific time, this layer or this star was at this position. And if we move, you can see the position changing until the point of that keyframe. That at this keyframe, or at this point in time, this layer had the attribute position at this interval, and so on and so forth. So by moving while the stopwatch is on, we are creating specific keyframes for that attribute. So if we play it back, you can see the motion now. Let's reduce the preview. You can reduce or increase the speed of this animation by reduce the distance between the keyframes. You can select the keyframes by drag selecting and then moving the selected keyframes. Remember, the closer the keyframes, the faster the animation. So you can see. And now if we increase the separation, then we would have slower motion. Another way to increase the distance of the keyframes without selecting one by one is first selecting all the keyframes at once and then holding Alt and then drag the last keyframe while holding Alt on your keyboard. So this way you can reduce or increase the separation distance. So we would have hold Alt, then drag the last keyframe. You can also select just a few keyframes and then select just a few keyframes and then hold Alt, then drag to reduce only those keyframes. You can also animate the scale the same way. Make sure you have clicked the stopwatch, and then as you move on the timeline, change that attribute to different, to mark a keyframe. Same with the rotation. First, click the stopwatch to mark a keyframe or to activate the recording for that attribute, and then start changing that attribute while the stopwatch is activated. Another way to set keyframes for properties is using the auto keyframe button, which is the stopwatch icon on the main toolbar on your timeline. So if we click that, it will change to red. So if we delete these keyframes by clicking again the stopwatch to delete the entire row of keyframes. So we don't have any animation here. So as long as auto keyframes is turned on or is showing red, any attribute that is animatable, if it is moved, so if we move the anchor point with the pan behind tool, you can see that we have recorded both the position and the anchor point automatically without first setting the stopwatch. So if I scaled this star, you see an automatic keyframe is set for that scale. And if I moved and rotated, I don't even have to set the keyframe, but a keyframe will automatically, and the stopwatch will also automatically be set for me. While this can be tempting to do, it can also become destructive, as you will end up with a lot of keyframes on your timeline, some when you don't really need them. In this lesson, we'll look at the run preview and play buttons. To preview your animation in After Effects, you can hit space and then your animation will start playing in the view area, in the work area. As you look in the info panel, you can see that we have this red warning showing that not in real time. This is indicating that our animation is not in real time. Real time is a way of telling you that your animation is not playing at the right frame rate of your composition. And your frame rate you can take, if we went to composition setting, that our frame rate is 29.97. But when we preview, you can see that we are previewing at a frame rate of 18 point, and it's changing, it's going down, it's going up. This is because we didn't first catch this animation. Loading your animation into cache in After Effects means basically that for After Effects to play your animation in real time or without lagging or dropping frames, it has to first load every part of your animation into cache or into memory. To load your animation into cache, select the portion of your animation by shrinking the work area bar. This is the work area bar. You can shrink it or widen it, or just double click the full timeline. So let's just preview a portion of this work area. So here, by shrinking this work area, we are telling After Effects to only load this as much as this portion of the timeline, not the full timeline, but only this portion of the timeline. To load your animation into Cache, just go in the preview area, or you can find this panel if you don't have it there from Windows preview, or using a shortcut Control 3. On the preview panel, we have basic buttons: the first frame, previous frame. This was move the cursor somewhere like. We have previous frame, which takes you one frame at a time backward. We have from the start, or first frame. We have play. We have next frame. Have the end or last frame. Let's bring this back. Have mute, or we have mute audio. Have loop. We can loop into the animation, and this button, run preview, is the button that enables you to load your animation into Cache. So if we want to load this whole animation into Cache, just press this button. So our animation is now, it has been loaded into Cache, and you can see that it's spraying at a frame rate of 29.97 real time. We can also change the frame rate for the preview by changing the frame rate in the run preview area. So if we can put it at 15 frames, then load it to Cache, then play. Change it 60. Let's bring it up. Let's put it back to 29. In this video, we'll be looking at masks. Masks are used to cut out portions of an image. For example, if I wanted to cut out this penguin from this image, I would use a mask. The same tools we use for drawing shapes are the same tools we use to draw masks. The only difference is, to draw shapes, you have to make sure that no other layer is selected, and then select the shape tool and then draw. This will automatically create a shape layer containing the contents of the shape. For example, we have created a rectangular shape, and we have in the contents we have a rectangle. If you create a star, remember no layer should be selected, then we would have a shape layer with a star polygon. Let's delete them. To create a mask, you have to have a layer selected. For example, to create a mask on this layer with penguins, I have to have this layer selected, and then use the shape tools to create a mask. Here I've masked the outside of the box, remaining only the contents within the box. And you can see on this layer now, I have the property layer mask, and it contains the mask I've created and some options like add or subtract. This enables you to add or subtract part of the mask you have drawn. You can also draw more than one mask on a layer. For example, if I wanted to add a circle on this layer, a circular mask on this layer, I'll just go select the ellipse tool and then draw a mask. You can see that we had the first mask 1, subtract a portion of the image, and then mask 2 added a part of that image. But if we interchange and we say subtract, you can see we have subtracted another piece. And if we interchange this to add, you can see that now everything within the image has been added, and a portion from that square has been subtracted with mask 2, which we ordered to subtract. We also have the other options like intersect, which only leave out within the intersection. You can move the mask to delete the mask. Select the mask and hit delete. select the mask, delete. We can also feather the edges of the mask, change the opacity, or expand the mask inwards or outwards. Delete, hit delete. We have been creating masks using the custom shape layers like triangles and ellipse. To create a custom mask, we will use the pen tool. Select the pen tool, and then let's draw out a mask around the penguin to mask it out from the scene. You can zoom in by scrolling your middle mouse and holding spacebar to move within your scene. Okay. See. Now we have masked out the penguin from the scene. We can also subtract or add. And if we toggle between transparency and black background, you see that we have now the penguin separated from the rest of the image. And if we put another image behind it, you can see can give it some feather, a little bit of feather to make it like 5 or 2. Yes. In this lesson, we'll look at layer styles. To access layer styles in After Effects, select the layer, go to Layer, and under, from the pop-up menu, you will find Layer Styles. And here you'll find all the layer styles that you can find in Photoshop. So, for example, we have the drop shadow, and they can also be layered on top of each other. So, I've added a drop shadow. Go back to Layer, Layer Styles. Let's add an inner shadow, layer style, layer styles, outer glow, layer styles, bevel and emboss. You can see every layer style we add, it becomes a property under the layer styles in our layer properties. So to change the drop shadow layer style, go to Layer Properties, Layer Style, and then from the menu, from the list, select the drop shadow. We can change distance, angle, off on, spread, the size. First reduce the opacity, then the noise. The fun bit about layer style is that they can be animated. So if we went to the drop shadow, if we animated the color by clicking the stopwatch to add a keyframe and then changing the color to a red, you can see we have changed the color of the shadow to red. Now let's move a few keyframes. If keyframe sword, change the color to green. So let's shrink our preview area and then catch this. Add it to run preview to preview. See. In this video, we'll be working with text. So first, let's create a new composition by going under Composition, New. Okay. Let's create a new text layer by going under the toolbar and accessing the T icon to access the text tool or type tool, and then click in the composition area, and then type in the text. Then confirm by clicking the selection tool. You can change the font or font size of a text by going under Window and look for the character panel. So Window, character panel, which is here. Or this character panel will automatically open if you access the text tool or type tool. So under the character panel, you can choose the font. Let's go with the Arial font or agency. Have that text. You can change between bold or regular. Let's go with bold. The font size. In effects, under effects and presets, we also have some effects for the text, for the text layer. So under animation and presets, you can choose presets or animation preset for the text under animation and presets and looking for text. So if we look at the options for text, 3D text, and 3D text, you will see a preset, and you can tell it's a preset set by this icon which has effects on it. So if we drag this to the text layer and try to play back, we can see we have some basic animation. Let's delete the effect by going to text, animator, to remove that effect or preset. So let's look at another preset. There are a lot of presets, and we will look at few of them before we can go into another. So let's go to buzzword one. Okay, there's another one. So that's about presets for the text layer. Let's look at the properties under text. So if we type in a text, we see under the text layer, we see another attribute called text. Text and transform. Transform is a property found on every layer, but the text is only unique to text, and you won't be finding it on other layers. So if we go to text, we can see source text, path, more options. Let's look at the path option. So under path, we will see path and that drop down menu which has none in its list. So the path they are talking about here is a mask or mask path that can be used to track the text onto. So if we created a mask here on this layer, select the layer and draw a simple mask. You don't even need to close it, just have to have it there. So let's close it for this case. So then go to the path and then select the mask. You can see now the text is trailing on that mask, and if we added more, this is a text tutorial. So let's reduce the font size. You can see that the path option helps you to trail the text onto the mask you have created. If we move, you can see. Let's change this to fit. So the fit, okay. We can reverse the path. Let's first scale the layer down so you can fit this in. Then go back to the text properties, path, reverse off, reverse on. Have the pen. You can also, to view more, you can change the width of the layer names to see the whole name of the properties. So have perpendicular path on, perpendicular path off, force alignment off, first margin, last margin. Guess it doesn't do much. So those are the path options. That's all about the path options. So let's go under more options and see what is there. Have the character grouping, word, line, all. Let's put it back to character. Group alignment. Remember, as long as there is a stopwatch on any attribute, it means that that attribute can be animated. So if we click on grouping and we created a keyframe and then moved that keyframe, you can see that we have created a simple animation. And same with the source, path, force alignment, anything else. You can go on to check what other properties do, but for now that is all about the text layer. In this video we'll look at effects. To add effects on a layer or composition, select the layer, go to Effects on the menu bar, Effects, Effects Control. This will open the Effects Control panel. Here you will find attributes or properties for the effects you have added to the layer. For example, if we went to Effects and selected an effect from the color corrections, let's say Hue and Saturation, the Hue and Saturation effect will be added to the layer, and we can see this in the Layer Effects Control. It also gives you properties or control to that effect. Also, if we checked under layer properties by going to this triangular icon, we'll see that we have a new property called effects, and under effects we have Hue and Saturation that we have just added. We can also add more effects to this layer by going to Effects and selecting another effect. For example, if we go to this dot and select an effect called Bulge, so it will also be added in the effects properties. If you know the name of the effects you want to use, go in the Effects and Presets panel and just search for that effect. So if we are looking for Hue and Saturation, we'll type in Hue stroke saturation, or you can just type in the first letters of the effects, say Hue, and all the effects with those letters will be listed in the search results. Let's first remove this effects by selecting. To remove an effect, just select the effect from the Effects Control panel and delete. If you don't have the Effects Control panel in your work area, go to Window and look for Effects and Controls. So, and also if you don't have Effects and Presets, go under Window and look for Effects and Presets, which is here, or use the shortcut Control 5. So let's add Hue and Saturation. You can just drag the effect to the layer, or you can drag it directly to the Effects and Control panel, as long as the layer is selected. You can change the attributes of that effect. So for example, you can change the saturation of the layer by changing the master saturation. You can see that we have made it black and white. Change the lightness. Effects are like filters in Photoshop. They help change the look of the image. Effects can also be animated like layer properties. For example, if we click on the stopwatch of the colorized hue, we'll have a keyframe for that hue at this specific time. And if we go under effects, we can see we have a keyframe for that hue. And if we change the time and then change the hue, you can change the hue from under the layer properties or just in the effects control panel. Change the hue, change the hue. So let's preview this. You can see now we have animated the hue. We also have presets for effects in the effects and presets panel, which you can access under to the first property or attribute in the effects and preset. As long as you have not typed anything in the search button, you won't access these presets under effects, but you will see them in the effects and presets panel. So under animation and presets, click the triangle to reveal more attributes. So let's first expand this and collapse this. So we have all these are presets and below are the effects. So let's first remove this effect, and from here let's look for any other effects. Let's say transform, dissolve. Okay, let's go for anything real quick there, and let's preview. You can see presets are just a combination of different effects. So we have a MasterCard control effect and then a block and dissolve effect to create this transition. That is effects and presets. And you can also add more effects on the same layer. We have added mask fade control. So in this video, we'll look at 3D layers in After Effects. To understand 3D layers, I've set up a typical 3D scene, including a flow or grid, a y-axis, X, and a Z-axis. These represent the axis used in 3D. Green for the y-axis, blue for the z-axis, and red for the x-axis. Before we get into the layers, first let's learn how to navigate through the scene. To move around effectively in a 3D scene in After Effects, we use the camera tools. These can be accessed under main toolbar, which is this camera icon. Dragging on this icon will open up a menu that gives you access to other tools like the orbit camera, track XY, track Z. First, let's look at the unified camera. We can use the shortcut C to toggle between these tools. For example, if you look at the icon now, we see the unified camera, the orbit camera, the track XY, and the track Z. Let's go back to the unified camera. This enables you to rotate around in any direction in the scene. The orbit camera also helps you do the same thing. We have the track XY. While holding, drag the cursor around the screen. See, track Z moves you in, out. As you can see, in the upper left corner, we can see the heading Custom View 1. This is a custom view that will help you viewing your 3D setup. You can interchange between views by going on the icons at the bottom of the composition panel and looking for custom view or views. Active camera is the camera that you would render when exporting your project or composition. Front is the front view. Left, top. These views enable you to view your scene in different angles. Back, right, bottom. Custom views. Custom views are set up so that you can orbit around your scene without interfering with the main camera that you are supposed to render. So if say this so to use the active camera in, you can see that we are getting an error now. We can drag or orbit in the active camera part because we have no active camera in the scene. So to create an active camera, go to layer, new camera. From the preset, let's go with a 35mm, then OK. Now if we selected the unified camera and we moved around, you can see that it's active. Now whatever motion we are making here with the unified camera is affecting our actual camera, and this will be the camera that will be rendered. So let's first reset this, move it a little bit up. So if this is the scene the setup I want to render, the other way to view other angles without interfering this active camera is by using custom camera. So this is our active camera, and by orbiting the scene while in the custom view, any custom view, we don't affect the position of our main camera that will be exported. So if we went back to our active camera, we can see it is still in the same position we put it. We can also subdivide the work area or the preview area by going to the header on the composition panel and then changing using the view drop down menu to, when you change from 1 to 2 views, we can see that our work area or preview area has been subdivided into two sections, this section and this section. So we can change these views but without affecting the other. So if I want an active camera this side and a top camera here, I just select top from here. Make sure the view you want to change is selected by showing these yellow corners. So if I change this to custom camera, I can orbit in this camera. Say if I created a layer, new solid layer, we'll look at 3D layers in details in a later chapter. So let's make this a 3D layer and zoom out this scene by selecting this scene and change the zoom percentage of the scene to fit. So let us scale this. Now we have this area to preview, since it gives us more control with our scene without interfering with the active camera. We can also change this to 2 views vertically or 4. You can choose what works best for you, but I'll go with 2 horizontally. To switch back to the single view, just select one view from the drop down menu. Let's continue with working on layers, and first let's delete it. Let's reset the scene. File, new project. Create a new composition. Any layer in After Effects can be a 3D layer. For example, if we created a new solid layer, make it that color, that white. Okay. To convert it to a 3D layer, on the timeline, check the box that is aligned to the 3D layer icon or the cube icon. This will make it a 3D layer, and you can tell it's a 3D layer by it showing the gizmo or these axes, the Y, X, and Z axis. And if you go to the transform properties by selecting this triangular icon, going to transform. Before going to transform, you can see now we have the option, the material option, that is only available for 3D layers. And if we switched off the 3D layer icon to convert it back to a 2D layer, we can see that the material option disappears. And if we bring it back, it comes back. We can see that each property has gained a third attribute to cover for the Z axis. But previously, when it was a 2D layer, you can see that each property had only two attributes: X, Y, X, Y, X, Y, and the rotation only had one attribute. So if we reset, let's reset, and when we switch it back to a 3D layer, you can see that we have gained a third attribute, which is for the Z axis. If we rotate X, Y, and Z, let's reset again, and the position of X, Y, Z. Remember, X is the red axis, green is the Y axis, and blue is the Z axis or the depth axis. If we go to custom view, you can see that X goes in that direction, Z, Y is up and down, Z is forward and back. Same with orientation, is same as rotation, only that it doesn't go beyond 360. Scale of X, if we first unlink and unconstrain the scale properties so that each axis scales independently, have X, Y, Z. We can also scale by just dragging the edges of that layer. If you drag the middle point, you can see that it's scaling in one axis. But if you drag the edge corners, you can see it's scaling in different axes. Set. Let's add another 3D layer to see how they interact in 3D space. New, solid. This time let's change it to a green color. Okay. We can see in custom view we can't see this layer, because in custom view we are only seeing 3D layers, and this is not yet a 3D layer. So, but if we went back to active layer, we can see, because it's top of the 3D layer, and a 2D layer will be on top of a 3D layer if it's listed above the 3D layer on the timeline. But if you put it below, the 3D layer will be above the layer. Let's push this a little bit. So to convert this into a 3D layer, check the cube. Now that we have made the green layer active a 3D layer, we can see even though the white layer is above the green layer is still showing on top of the white layer. This is because in 3D layer, when we go to custom view, we can see that the green layer is in front of the white layer. So if we move this in front, see, and went back to active view, or let's split the screen and change this from top to custom view 1. So if we move this back, you can see, oh, let's scale this a bit and scale this just a little bit. Let's see, we are moving it in the Z axis. So if we rotated this, we can also use these icons or these tools for rotating or manipulating the object in 3D space. You can use the rotate tool to rotate the object using its axis, the selection tool to move, in this video, we'll add some lights, a flow, and a background to our 3D scene. First, let's create a flow. To create the flow, let's create a new layer, new solid layer. Change it to white. Let's give it some color, maybe brown, yellow. Go back to active camera. Oh, first split the views. Active camera. Change this layer to a 3D layer. Then rotate it on the x-axis 90 degrees by holding Shift to rotate in increments. Then let's move it to the bottom of our cube. First, let's change this to front so we can see the bottom of our cube. And yeah, we have made it. Then let's scale it more. Change this to custom view, to a single view. Custom. Let's zoom out a little bit by using the track Z tool. Then let's orbit around. We have a cube. It is intersecting, so let's move our layer a little bit. Okay. Then you can see we have a cube seated on a floor. Now to add lights, let's go to layer, new, light. We can choose between an ambient light that will light the whole scene from everywhere. Example, you can see that there is no defined direction of light for our source of light, but light is coming and lighting our scene evenly from all directions. So let's change it to point light intensity. Let the intensity be 50. No fall off, cast shadows. Okay. Now we have created the light, but it's inside our cube. So let's move it by selecting it, dragging it in the Z and the Y axis. Now we can see that it's very settled light. So to increase the light, double click on the layer or go to layer, light settings, and change the intensity. You can also change the color of the light by double clicking the light layer or going to layer, light settings, changing the color. Let's give it bluish. Let's also add another light there. Yeah. Light. This time let's add a spotlight. Same settings. Okay. And now let's move it back. Then up. And let's change the point. We can see our lights are not generating any shadows on the object. To enable shadows on these objects, select the layer, go to layer properties, materials, and under material options, make sure accept shadows is turned on, because this is the floor layer. It may not cast shadows since it's just on the floor, sitting on the floor. And now let's make sure that our cube layers have cast shadows on, and right now they're off. It's off. Its cast shadows is set to off. That's why we are not receiving any shadows. So immediately when we turned it on, we can see that we have some shadows now. But this shadow is only turned on for this layer only. So let's select all the rest of the layers by selecting the first layer, and then hold shift, select the last layer, and all the layers in between will be selected. And so any change we make on this layer should affect all the other layers, the other selected layers. So if we turn on cast shadows, all other layers should have cast shadows on. You can see. So let's collapse this. Now we have our cube. Our flow ends drastically. This shows that the flow is very small. So to make it appear more wide, we could feather it into the background by using a mask. So select the layer. From the shape tools, select the ellipse tool and double click on the tool, on the ellipse tool, to create a mask that circles the whole layer. So we have a circular mask around this shape. Now let's give it some feather to make it feather into the background, so we can't see the end of our background. And let's expand this negatively. Expand inside. Expand it into the mask, so we lose the sharp edges of the mask. In this lesson, we'll create a cube using 3D layers. First, let's create a new solid layer. Change it to green. Okay. Because the cube is made from squares, let's make this a square by dragging the edges until we have something that looks like a square. And then turn it to a 3D layer. Let's divide the view area into two. Have two horizontal views. Change this from top to custom view 1. So we have one 3D layer. A cube is made of 6 sides. Let's duplicate this layer by selecting the layer. Go into edit, duplicate, and then move this. Let's change this layer to another color by selecting the layer. Go into layer, solid settings, selecting, let's go with a blue. then new. Let's rotate this square to have it as the floor of the cube. By going to transform and changing the rotation X, since we want to rotate it on the X axis 90 degrees. Now let's move it so that the edges touch to make a corner. We can also change this from active camera, since we are not using it right now, to from active camera to front or left, so that we can have a more clear view of what we are doing. Select the layer, drag it to the bottom of the cube. Then duplicate this layer by selecting it, going to edit, duplicate, and then drag it to the top of the layer. Change the color of this layer by going to layer, solid settings. Just change it to a red or orange, then new. Then select the green layer. Let's duplicate it. First collapse this, duplicate it by going to edit, duplicate, or using the shortcut Ctrl D. Just drag it to this side. Let's use the hand tool to move around the scene to see what we are doing. So use the pan around the scene. So if you had one view, change this to custom camera view, and see that this is what we have made so far. Let's also change the color of this solid to another color. Let's go with yellow. Then okay, so we have something like this. Now select the yellow layer, duplicate it, edit, duplicate, go to transformation, or use the rotation tool. Let's zoom in a little bit and move over the green axis or the Y axis until the cursor turns into a Y. To rotate the square around that axis, the Y axis. In order to rotate in increments, hold Shift so that we can rotate in increments of 10 till we have 720 as our orientation. Remember, orientation is the same as rotation. So smooth, subdivide the view again, move this to top. Let's see the top, and divide this to horizontal, top, and change the color of this solid to, let's say, that almost white. Then move to this side. Oh, see, this layer is bigger than the rest of the layers, so we may need to scale it down a little bit, the x-axis. So move it around, adjust. Let's duplicate it too. Change the color. Layer solid. Let's make it red. And then move it to the other side to close off the cube. Now let's switch back to the single view. Change this to custom camera. Off. Then rotate. And see, now we have our cube. We have a finished cube.